psalm. Nope. With David in distress and vowing to keep his silence. And closes with David crying out to God with tears. The overall tone, the mood of the psalm does not change very much from beginning to end, which is kind of like how life is sometimes, is it not? The Psalms, this serves as a good reminder that the Psalms are very realistic. Not only do they deal with every human emotion, but they tell us how we should respond in these various circumstances. And sometimes it doesn't just end with great news, but still there is hope here, and there is insight for dealing with similar circumstances as to David. We're not told what is distressing David in this psalm, but some commentators from various references like in verse 2 and verse 6 and 11 suggest that maybe it's similar to what we talked about 2 weeks ago in Psalm 37. This question, why are evil people holding power and prospering and persecuting the righteous, and why are they suffering? That may be the case here as well. Regardless, verse 1 of Psalm 39 opens with David's resolution to be silent. He said, I will guard my ways, lest I sin with my tongue. And this is a good thing. Spurgeon, commenting on this verse, says this, if I have the fever myself, there is no reason why I should communicate it to my neighbors. If any on board the vessel of my soul are diseased, I will put my heart in quarantine and allow none to go on shore in the boat of speech till I have a clean bill of health. Something for us to think about as well. But David, he can't keep this resolution. By verse 3, he says, my heart was hot within me. While I was musing, the fire burned. We get an image here almost of a volcano. He's trying to suppress, but he's angered and distressed, and it comes out in verse 4. David bursts out in prayer to God, and his prayer here is not necessarily a noble one. He says, Lord, make me to know my end, and what is the measure of my days? But what he's saying here in verse 4 and following is basically, God, tell me when I'm going to die so that I can count down the days until my suffering is over. God, you know my life. I'm just a breath, and in the grand scheme of things, I'm nothing. So why are you allowing this suffering to come on me? I'm a mere nobody in the grand scheme of things. So show me how much longer I have to endure this. He's complaining. But what we have here is in this psalm is a mix between what Calvin calls appropriate prayers and inconsiderate complaints. Though the context here is complaining, it's arising out of his complaint, there's truth in the content. We are nothing but a breath. Life is short. And what it does is it serves to change David's perspective because he's still going to God in prayer. What this tells us is that God can even use faulty prayers when we go to him. Even when we're distressed and offer distress prayers. Even if we're offering prayers full of complaints, God still uses them. Why? Because all of our prayers are faulty. We're told in Romans 8 that we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. We're told also in Romans 8 and in Hebrews 7 that Christ intercedes on behalf of us before the Father as well. Therefore, even though the context of David's prayer is complaining, the content is truthful and it changes his perspective. David realizes not only that he's small, he says that he's small, but how big God is, and as well, his enemies, their life is no more than a breath as well. In verse 6, talking about his life, changes to they. He says, surely they busy themselves in vain. He heaps up riches and does not know who will gather them. But then we see, verses 7 through 11, we see David become further and further removed from the complaining attitude with which he began. In verse 7, there's a statement of faith. My hope is in you. In verse 8, there's a petition for forgiveness. In verse 10, there's a plea for mercy. And then notice verse 11. It says, when with rebukes you correct man for iniquity, you make his beauty melt away like a moth. An interesting description of how God works here. It's not, he doesn't describe God as a lion, as sometimes it does in the Bible, a moth. How does a moth work to destroy? It works so over time and behind the scenes. And so he's pointing out that even the best men are brought down behind the scenes. Why are evil men prospering and ruling? Well, God is working behind the scenes to destroy even their intentions. So let us take comfort in that today.